Zapraszamy teraz.
Now, please, the next speaker, Mr. Bartosz Urbaniak, member of the board of the BGZ BNP Paribas Bank and one of the sponsors of our events. So, big ovation for the member of the board. Good day. Well, I will start to be also concise. Well, I will just get the technicalities of switching images going. Okay. Yes. Good. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I was okay. I am the bank BGZ. We've been present on the market for nearly 100 years now. As the Professor Kowalski said about this prideful financing people, well, I hope I am the other half of the sector. I will try to show it to you. And my presentation, as it turned out, well, by chance happening, it's both the summary of what's been shown until today, and in a way, I have some animated elements here. I have no idea I had them, that will summarize of what's been said before and will show how we as a bank that been present in the sector since the sector was created in Poland, how we see its growth in the Polish, European and global context. So the first, what can we say? How does it look globally? Well, some of the speakers showed it, so I won't be going into much detail here, but I can say that it grew, and we believe that it will continue growing, but it will grow a bit slower than previously. If we look at, let's say, where is that growth coming from in the European context, we can see that the amount of meat is eaten a bit less in the European Union, but after a drop, we see that the meat consumption is rebuilding. So we don't really see it rebuilding as strong to the levels from, let's say, from before the crisis, so the 2007, but we see a slow increase in consumption, and we believe that it will continue. And how is it distributed among the three main types of meat? So beef, pork, and poultry. You can see in the bubbles, the bigger the bubble, the bigger consumption of a given type of meat. So we believe that this gray bubble for poultry will be growing, and we're pushing the pork away. So when I started working in the industry, we thought that 15 kilograms per capita a year is a lot, or even that it was a very high consumption. But today, with EU, we have over 20 kilograms. With Poland, we have over 30 kilograms per year per capita. We have countries where the consumption is over 40. So we believe that the level is not the threshold. The maximum level is not with a given number. It's honestly the question of substituting one meat for another and asking what is more affordable or preferable by a consumer. And here is a graph that shows just how it grew. The situation in Poland. I'm not going through some of the slides because, well, we are an exporting country. But here, using this image, this table, I can show you that this is an excerpt from a survey that we did as a bank of what can be expected. This was a question to the consumers. It is not a statistical analysis. We asked 3,500 consumers about three Polish families on what do they expect to spend more money on? And here we've got an aspect that is visible, that in Poland the meat is still seen as a luxury good. This is not really so visible in Poland, but the chocolate consumption went up, whiskey consumption and other alcohol went up. So the products that are seen are like as the premium products. When you look at the volume, we see that the consumption of meat is growing, and it was mostly realized via consumption of those types of meat or meat products that are considered as the premium ones. So here you can see that also on the internal market there is a space to grow. And in Poland, well, you can clearly see that there are some differences related to programming. I would say this is the difference, like Microsoft and Apple, and but because it lacks one axis. Okay, but for what I see, that poultry is the growing blue line, and the pork is the yellow one that is going down. So you can clearly see how one type of meat is substituted for another, so that the pork is replaced by poultry. And the second thing that is not really so visible, but that is as Poland as such, when it comes to consumption of poultry per capita, we are at the forefront of Europe. We eat quite a lot of poultry in relation to other meat types and in relation to other citizens of Europe. And this dynamics of consumption is quite big, and it's not slowing down. So this is something that should be taken into consideration. And now, what is the situation on the chicken market and turkey market? Well, here, okay, if we look here, still this is 2016 is the green line, and it is at the beginning of the chart. We are trying to show you that there is a typical seasonality to a year. So this dotted line is the average 2011-2015, and 2016 is well below the average, but still we can say that in the general, within the general trend. So we have the same trend as in the previous year. It's lower. Well, so we can say that the prices are relatively low. And this is the turkey market. We have a situation that our economists are still thinking on what to say about it, because we can clearly see that the prices for turkey, well, basically have broken out of their normal trends. And if somebody was to ask me what is the justification for that, what is the reason, I have no idea. It's happened. Perhaps something new is occurring on the market, but the prices are not willing to follow the typical seasonal trend that we have worked out through the many years. And it seems that we have something new occurring, and it would be worthwhile to look at it and how the prices relate to the feed. So here we've got the comparison of the price of turkeys to the price of the feed. So this is not too high, but still, if we take into consideration the feed prices, then this is not that bad. So this is above the average. So perhaps here is some part of the explanation why we had this strange trend line, so that we should perhaps look at the market in relation to the prices of the basic cost factors, which is the feed in this case. And if we look at the chicken, the broilers, so here, well, it should be better, but we see that it's a bit worse, to say. So the chickens, in relation to the multi-year average and in relation to the feed prices, it turns out that they are less profitable than they were mm, in relation to the multi-year average. And here we've also got the indication of how the market is reacting to it. So in the financial analysis, we mostly say that the market feels strong, so it reacts with increasing production. If the margins go down, if the profits from production go down, then to compensate for the similar market is by increasing production. So this is it. And in the circle, you can see that this is the time that you need to have a proper buying power or proper financial buffer to live through the local volatility of the prices, because the trend is a strong one, but we have high differences in short-term prices. This is a moment where the strong ones are developing and the weak ones are losing. So we see that this is a moment where the leaders solidify their position, and those who were just in the end, at the end of the peloton, are getting even weaker. And the table shows the degree of the changes. And here can you see December plus 15, January plus 1, February plus 17. So these are very high changes. This look like basically this is nearly like the smaller companies at the trading floor of the Warsaw Stock Exchange. There is a very high high variation in prices. So placements, well, if we look at trend, then the trend shows us that the amount of placements is higher. It's 20% higher. So here we can say that if we remember the previous graph, then the loss in margins in relation to the feed costs with 20% higher placements, if there is no catastrophe on the market, will result in the fact that the income that is retained by the industry will be higher. So we expect higher income, higher revenue in the industry, thanks to higher placements of checks. With turkeys, as you can see, the situation is relatively similar, although the graph is presented in a different way to show you that there is a big difference quarter to quarter. So those markets cannot be compared one another. They have to be analyzed individually. They have their own dynamics, their own characteristics. And if we look at, this is something that the president of the Agricultural Market Agency at the sector, so this is how the sector looks, and this is quite surprising for everyone. But it's not about the volume of production. It is that one country, this is Poland, managed to produce 18% of intra-EU trade. This is a lot. If we look at where is it growing, so it's growing mostly in Poland. Poland is the only country that has the double-digit growth in production. It's 11%, while in other countries the growth is much, much lower. Well, the Hungary has 11% as well, but their basis is much smaller. We are the biggest producer. We have the highest growth, which shows that Poland is not only the leader, but is strengthening itself as the leader. Turkeys. Well, as I said, turkeys should be analyzed separately from the broilers and chicken. We are not as a significant producer of turkey as we are in chicken, but if we continue with this 10% trend, then we will be a significant producer as well. So here you can see that the other countries are not really characterized by a significant growth. It's limited or stable, or the situation is stable. On the next graph, we can see, this is trying to have it all synthetically on one graph. So I'll try to explain what's on it. The first dot is the size of production. Second, on the vertical axis, we have the consumption per capita on the local market, and the horizontal axis is how a given country is focused on export. So how much of the local production, how much of production is used locally, and how much is exported. So you can see that that Netherlands is the leader. They produce over 2 times more than they need for their own. The second export country is Poland, which is also first a country with big production and with big consumption, internal consumption. And it seems that we are a poultry specialist at a European level. But here, if you look at it, those markets such as Great Britain, Spain, when you look at production, they are large, but they also consume a lot locally. We have to think about these bigger countries, bigger societies, bigger needs. So via import, they have a bigger internal market. We have 40 million people in Poland. It is not as big as the German or the French market, which is simply much larger number of citizens. And what is our export? Well, our export is growing. It's obvious. I've been saying that. All the previous speakers were saying that. But here we are trying to show that, however, export to the EU market is dominating. The share that you can see, this is the gray one. This is to third countries outside the EU. It is first is more visible, and second is characterized by high dynamics. So 16.24%, and its comparison and not that much. But please take into consideration that there's 24% of growth in the export to non-EU countries. This is 50% more growth than towards the Union. So our main destinations are mostly the EU, mostly the German market. When we show it, it's 70% of our export. Well, so this is sensible because it's our neighbor, so this is the simplest thing to do. But Benin, which is the gate to Asia or gate to the Arab countries, is also visible. Hong Kong is, well, gate to China. So you can see that this export is basically, our export is seeing other direction than only sending it to our neighbors or to the single market. And now, if we go outside the EU for a moment, I would like to give you a few images because, okay, I see some signs that I should, because the president told us about the global market, so I'll try to summarize that in a way. Well, Poland is the leader, or the European tiger, as you will. But the European Union is the fourth, after the US, China, and Brazil. And if you look at the difference in forecast between 2015 and 2024, when the growth in the European Union is the lowest one. The most increase in production will be seen in China, in US, and Brazil, and Union will be the fourth one, with the increase of about 1.3 million tons, which is a lot less than the largest producers active on the international market. And from my viewpoint, an interesting thing is that we see significant important forecast as far as production in Mexico or China is or Russia is concerned. Mexico, for us, it's, well, abstract, and we don't really know what impact can it have, but I would advise against thinking that. But if you have 18% of share in the cross-EU, intra-EU share, that perhaps maybe Mexico can take over some of the American exports that will impact the Polish exporters. And if the Russia is more self-sustainable, it has a certain consequences for us, let's say, just across the border. So the main exporters, here it looks a bit different because the main exporter is the Brazil. The US is on the second place. And as you can see, the differences are growing. So the American market recently had a phase of accelerated growth, but when we look at the data that we have from Agri Europe, then it shows that Brazil is the export demon that is accelerating hard. And here you can clearly see why. The broiler prices in euros per kilogram. Brazil is the green line on the bottom. The blue one is the EU, and the red one is the Americans. So this is partially, well, I will show it on the next picture, that EU has a quite well developed, well, maybe we can think that it's not the your main beneficiary of different support programs, but the European Union stabilizes the prices quite strongly. The changes of the prices in the European market are not that quick, but the changes on open markets, such as like Brazilian one or American one, the changes are much quicker and they are much deeper when you look at the graph. Well, we also have to remember that the impact on those graphs, on these lines, have also impacted by the currency market, which is not a calm one recently, which is also, and this is also impacts the way in which those lines look like. So where do we have the differences from? So first of all, due to certain expectations that are formulated for, let's say, in the agreement that is the European Union. So is maintaining the well-being, the environment, following different norms and safety measures as far as the food safety is concerned, but also as far as the way in which the animals are maintained and raised, and which is completely different from other parts of the world, for example, the United States. Well, to list the difference in which the well-being is approached and the stocking density, GMO, and usage of blood and bone meal, the cost of energy and transport, which are significantly higher in Europe than in the US, and the environmental issues like the ammonia or eliminate or the waste. I've been working in many places in the world. I was advisor to one of the banks in China, and I remember visiting one chicken farm, and it was the shortest inspection in my life. I took one breath in, I inhaled air once inside the chicken house, and I decided I will go out immediately because I thought I would die where I stood. And in the American or European chicken houses, well, sometimes I stood inside with the owner discussing football, soccer, and basically the air was not a problem, but in China it was impossible to breathe inside. So the differences are inconceivable. You have to feel it to understand it. So there is no cost for the environmental impact of the production being paid by the producers. So, so how is the consumption of poultry meat? And for me, this is interesting because I was not aware that the leader when it comes to consumption of chickens is Israel. But, well, nobody expects a big growth there. The second graph here shows that we expect high growth of consumption per capita, and there's many kilograms. So Malaysia, Ukraine, South Africa, we believe that there will be a significant increase in consumption of chickens, of more or less. So now an example of how is it possible to grow. So especially a close-up to Saudi Arabia, 30 million citizens, 33 kilograms per head. But we have an example here because we were part of Rabobank. We are in a BNP group, so I look at the French export to third countries. You can see that French exports mostly to Saudi Arabia, nearly 50%, highly specialized exporter. But this is also a nice market because it's a rich market. But here, as a question mark, something to think about, food for thought, I would like to point your attention to the fact that there's a country called Oman. I've been recently reading some policy documents, some form of for Oman, and they wish to become a touristic center that will have 30 times more tourists than today, and there will be a need to feed them. And this is a country where the pork is not the most popular meat type due to various reasons, and so maybe it's worth thinking about this. I believe that Oman appears on many presentations, but you also can become specialized when looking not to our plans, but the plans of the different third countries that we see as possible destinations. Because many people there write about their policies and their ideas for the future, so there's nothing better than a consumer who knows his needs. But the basic question is as follows. We have to remember, and this is what I was driving at, that it is our clients who, to a large degree, decide on what they want to eat. And this is not a philosophical question. Would you say a leg or breast meat? But when exporting, you have to take into consideration what is interesting for people in a given country. This is a different country where I worked at. So for South Africa, it's difficult to find breast meat in a store. There's mostly legs or drumstick that are served in a different way, many different ways. But it's in Poland, I believe it is at least in the Western Europe, it's the breast fillet. So I'm driving at that it's not enough because you can say this about poultry. It has three attributes. It's cheap, it's convenient, and it's considered healthy. Whether it is healthy, when you talk to the producers, they are saying, well, I don't really know, the antibiotics, whatnot, but still I saw both the pork and the poultry production. Well, yep, it has to be healthy because at least they live short compared to other animals, so it's a healthy food. And it is, well, it's easy to prepare. So it seems that the cheap argument is mostly taken advantage of by Brazil or in the US, and it will be very difficult to produce cheaper than there. But the European Union, when requiring certain norms, they push us more into the direction to be for the poultry meat to be considered mostly safe and healthy, and it can be also adjusted for a very convenience-focused society. If you have children, you can But okay, if you think about the parents, then what we believe to be convenient for them, it's survival and wildlife, basically. So they prepare, they expect everything to be prepared for them, and plus they are fully sure that they are individualized. So it's impossible to have one cutlet that fit everyone's needs. You need to have different types, at least to meet the self-importance image of a given young consumer. So there will be many products created to cater to this individualism approach. So some consumers will be looking for convenience, other will be looking for health products, and others will be looking at price. And when going back from that direct consumer and looking from the perspective of, so to say, the macro indicators, then first, no matter how globalized we are, there will be local specialities, local characteristics, because local cuisine is something that is, well, being reborn now. So everyone will need products and the food type that is proper to his or her region. And but the more and more societies, especially in our direct surroundings, are becoming more and more rich, and the Poland society is also becoming richer. So when we observe the margins, I would look at the premium sector and strong local preferences, such as the duck done in the Poznań style, or the chicken done in the Warsaw style, can be also important. And the last thing that I would like to focus your attention on is that in the next years, many decades, an important buyer will be humanitarian aid, realized this way or the other way. But in many cases, it seems that the redistribution of goods that we observed on the world requires additional assistance, that will be more and more food shipped between the rich north and the poorer south, but also within the rich European Union. Well, the European Union buys a lot of food and then redistributes it among its poor citizens. So this is another sector that requires a very specific product that, well, honestly, we aren't really able to prepare. But I believe that this product will be important for many years to come. Okay, conclusions. Well, recently, journalists asked me, how will it look with the Polish poultry sector, because it basically broke historical records. Well, yeah, that is true, but half a year you did the same. 1 year ago, it was still breaking historical records. It seems that, again, it's the cheapest, the most convenient, the easiest to prepare source of protein. Animal protein will be growing as long as it can, thanks to the good cost base and the good organization of the sector. Maybe you're unable to fully appreciate it. You're much better organized than the pork market. But as long as you have the structural differences, then the better organized poultry sector will be winning and will push the pork out of the plate, so to speak. An important factor for the Polish poultry is also its position in the international market. First, we're pushing out some of the products from the European market, but also the competitive position of the European poultry in the world is not that good. And that is a factor that is not too good for our growth, and that will become important. So this driving force is to a large extent outside the European Union. But we, with our relatively high production here, for a market like China, we're a small supplier. So the things that we try to see in the activities of the Polish market, is industry like exporting via Hong Kong or Benin, it's a smart approach to choose and select such countries where we can basically become specialized and use them as a springboard to develop further production. And what is also important, was being said by the president of the Agriculture Market Agency, is building proper brand. This is something that I've been speaking for over 10 years in Poland at different fora, but we have a situation on the international and European market that building any brand is based on the brand of a given country. Recently, I read the research that the brands are not really international. They are strongly related to the country of their origin. So they have both their own value as the brand, but also the value of the country that stands behind the brand. So some of the things you can do yourself, but some of the things you have to do together, and you have to promote a good brand, and you have to build it slowly and step by step to create the better image of the Polish poultry industry. So thank you very much for your attention. So thank you very much, Mr. President. And we'd like to also present to you this commemorative plaque for your presentation. Okay, thank you again.